Okay, so in this video, I'm just going to describe an automation that we made to basically create a global task list notifier. Now, what does this mean? Well, inside of Notion, obviously, for whatever you decide to do, you can have, different Kanbans and stuff sorted, and there could be people who are assigned to different things and assigned to different roles, but there's no global place for anybody to see all of that information because in ClickUp, the that actually is something that's present on a homepage. This is built into ClickUp. So if you go in to your own ClickUp and you see everything that you've been assigned, you can literally go in and just have a look at all of the stuff that you've been assigned and say, all right, this is what I need to do. This is what I'm assigned. This is what's overdue, etc., etc., etc. So each individual member of the person's business could log in, see what's overdue, as put it on their own to-do list and just get to work on the things, right? This is something that isn't supported inside of Notion. So we just created it, and I'm going to explain how we created it. Basically, this client they do three things. They do email, paid, and organic campaigns. So we basically set out to create this nice Kanban where each individual step is a part of the process, and inside of the card itself is a template to describe everything that the individual needs to do. There are also automations, inbuilt Notion automations on the individual tasks, and those automations will basically create a new task inside of a global task list. Now, this global task list is all of the individual sub tasks for the campaign itself. So you can see here, this one says stickies. Stickies has A and B, which needs to be done. And if you click into the card, you can see set up content, send final shortlist, create the shortlist and confirm photo shoot date. These are all associated to these because you can see 1, 2, and 3 is right here. So that was operational, and Notion basically created all of the tasks whenever something moves. For example, if I move this here into setup photo shoot, if I reload the page, you'll see that we have 2 new activities. Share social strategy, any branding, schedule the call with photographers. Cool. So now we know that there are 2 extra things here. Now the problem is this global task list is missing the assignees. The assignees is the key here because you can take any Notion table and duplicate it and have it sync across everyone. And that is how we planned on creating this little board here for each individual person, because you would just filter it for that individual person's view, and then that is their to-do list ready to go. So the only thing hindering that was the assignees. So what we did was the following. If I click play, it will find these 2 and assign them. So what's happening here is Make is watching for new pages created in this global task list, and then it is determining which of these is it associated to, because there's only going to be certain tasks for certain campaigns, and each campaign is different for each individual person. It's going to have a different name to it. So, all right, cool. Organic campaign. This is the one that we have. It's going to find this campaign in here, look at the assignees, and then paste those assignees onto the actual page. The way that it is done is way more fiddly than it looks right here. So if I go in, this is a normal watch database items, and then we added a router, which basically just sees if the relation matches. So property 6 relation 1 matches organic, and there'll be different numbers for each of these. So if I go back out and back in again so that I can have a look at the list again. If paid campaign properties to relation 1 ID exists, then it goes that way. If it's this, it goes that way. And if it's this, it goes that way. So you can see that there's numbers here. And then if we go into the get parent campaign, you can also see that there's numbers here. So what do these numbers mean? Well, whenever you have, for example, in Notion, Let me run this again just so that we can get an understanding of the structure. Choose manually. We'll just select the last one that came out. But basically, it's going to spit out a certain structure. And this is where dealing with the arrays in complex ways is really important. So when you watch database items, the first thing it will do is, let's say for each individual bundle, we'll take bundle 2, which is just the second page that was found. It's going to spit out created by, last edited by, parent, properties values. So with this, properties is an array with a bunch of objects in it, and these objects have their own collection. So this here is the date property, which is called expected due. This one here is is a relation, which is the paid campaign relation. This is the associated client relation. This is the assignees relation. This is organic campaign relation, email campaign relation, people's not relation, sorry. Status, which is the status of the card, priority, and the task, which I believe is just the task title. So you can see that there's numbers here, right? 1 to 9. 1 to 9 represents the individual property, and because the properties themselves come out in this form, each individual, so properties 5 relates to the organic campaign, which means if this ID is present, then, and it won't be present in the others, which are paid and email. So you can see how it's empty here and it's empty here. We want to select for this and not select for these, which is why we have this filter, which if I go back, you'll be able to see the information about. Remember, it was number 5 was the organic campaign, and we wanted the ID, which is inside of the array, it's spot number 1, which is why it's 5 and then 1. So whenever you get these little brackets here, you can basically select for a particular part of the array so that each time that you run this, it picks the right one. Because if you if you left these out, it's only going to pick the first property in the first ID inside of that property. And properties number 1 is not organic, paid, or email. So we have to specify that in order to get the ID that we want. So that was the first step. The second step is to get the parent campaign. Now the parent campaign is the relation. So we've just found that obviously whenever a database item is added, and this is part of the automation, whenever a parent ID is added, the organic campaign, so the relation is also added, and it's, you know, the page that the automation's worked on. So for every page that's created by a movement from this card, it will create a task and it will link that task back to this campaign. So that happens automatically because Notion has sorted that out basically for us, which means we can get the ID of that relation and then drag in the details of that relation into the payload and use it later, which is exactly what we're doing here. And the only thing we're doing is the same thing that we filtered for is the campaign that we are getting. So you can see here that it says properties 2, which is the paid campaign relation. We're getting the paid campaign relation here. The email campaign relation, which is this one, we're getting this one here as well. So that allows us to drag all of the information about the parent campaign into the payload, and then we can use that information, which holds the assignees that we want to paste into the new global task. We can now add that assignee to the individual campaign, which takes us to this part. And this part is was the most fiddly part of the whole thing. So when you want to update a database item, you basically want to pick the ID of the database, i.e. this page, which is probably going to be, you know, somewhere in here. It's going to be one of these names. And then we want to pick the page ID, which is the ID of the item that we're trying to update, which is going to be the global task. So we already have this information from the payload. We already know that because we are watching for a new global task, we already have the information of the ID of the database and the ID of the item because we've just been watching that. So that's what comes into these two. And then we have assignees and people. So this here is the field that we want to update. And this is now going into JSON where JSON is built on key value pairs. So if you look at any of this information here, it's ID, object, user, ID, blank, key value, key value, key value. So we just want to find what the key and the value is. The key that we're looking for, is called assignees, because if you click in here, the key is assignees, and the value is going to be the people from the parent campaign. Now, the way that we get all of them in is to use this map function. So the map function, the easiest way to explain it is it's basically like a search tool within an array. So looking at properties people, if I just type in people, properties people, you can see the people array, and I'm going to see if I'm going to do this very poorly inside of JSON lint, but you can see that the properties people, in fact, I might be able to do this if I just take the, I'm going to run it again, and I'm just going to grab the actual output bundle so that you can see exactly what this looks like from the code. Because if you can see it from the code, then you can understand exactly what I am saying. So if I grab this and do this again, cool. So we have an input bundle. In fact, that actually is the answer. So let me see if I can grab an output bundle. Properties, people. Cool. So inside of JSON lint, we have this code. Obviously, I've just truncated the end of it, so it's not going to come out as valid. But you can see that the people array, the properties people, contains a number of key value pairs. The map function basically wants us to, the way that you want to use the map function is you basically want to find the key that you are looking for and then put the value in. And the key that we wanted is ID. So we went for properties to people because people is the second array inside of, it's the second collection inside of properties. Number 2 here, people. And we want to find all of the values that are IDs, which is why when you click in here and you see what the input bundle is, it's given us this because this is what we were searching for. And this is how I believe almost all project management tools, whenever you want to track assignees or you want to add certain objects, multiple objects of a certain kind to another task or to another field, this is how you would do it. You would have to take an array of a comma separated array of all of the values that you want to add, because again, key value. So if you have the values, then it will update correctly. And this is how it's meant to look in this particular scenario, where you have a map function, and this function gives us the people array, which will give us object ID, name, avatar, type, and person. And obviously, if you put all of this in, it's going to come back as this is not valid. So what we want to do, you basically want to yeet all of this and grab the ID. But if you only put in people ID, which is what was done before. So if I went in and I basically took the people, oh, can't spell. If I took people and then I put ID here, it would work, but it's only going to find the first person because we haven't mapped for all of the IDs that are there and we haven't put any numbers in. And if you put any other number in, say for example, I put in 2, then it's only going to find the second assignee. And if there isn't a second assignee because only one person's on the task, it will just fail. So we want to map for every single item, which is an ID. And the reason why this took so long is because, at least for me to properly understand it, is because I was putting this in because that is what I was looking for and it wasn't coming back. But the reason why it is ID is because there is a raw value that you have to find every single time that you do this. And you can find that if you hover over here. So if I put people back in here, ID raw is ID in lowercase. So whenever you're using map functions and things like that, you have to use this raw value, and this is how you would find it. So avatar underscore URL, if you wanted to get the avatars in, you wanted object would be that way, type in lowercase. So that's kind of the last thing that you need to know as far as maps concerned. If you're looking for something inside of your payload and you want to take, you know, small parts of an array, you want to filter out a certain set of keys, then you need to have the raw value in your map criteria or else it won't work. And that was the last missing piece of this automation. So we now have a situation where if I were to move this in here, we will get new pages. And if we run the automation, we will get updated assignees. And whenever we copy this global task list, which I'm actually going to show you now, I'll just delete their name so that no one will see. But now we can see under this individual person's list or this individual person's personal homepage in Notion, we have a global task list which has certain assignees, and you can see that it is literally everything that we've just spoken about, but filtered for the individual in here. So obviously we've just been testing around with this. If I was to change the name to this individual person, she would only see the tasks that are in her page, the tasks that she's been assigned, and she can go in and see what the original campaign was from the side window and say, okay, this is what we need. And if there's any extra clarity or anything else that she wanted to know, she can go into the individual page and then move things over and have everything sorted that way. So that's kind of how we've created this inside of Notion. The only problem, and it's kind of a problem, but also can be mitigated with just having a load of credits, is that this isn't like instant. It's not whenever any database item is done, it just finds all of the database items that have come through in a certain schedule that we've set. So if there was a way to make this, you know, immediate, I've not seen it, but this is the best that we have been able to do, and it works like a charm. So that kind of gives us an idea of how to do global task list notifiers.